Disney and Pixar always had some behind-the-scenes strife over business issues like distribution, profits, and creative input. It came to a head in a public battle in 2004 and 2005. The upcoming Cars was going to be the last Pixar movie Disney would distribute under their old contract, and Pixar was seeking other partners and toying with the possibility of going independent. It's a whole mess I can't do justice, but it ended with Pixar being purchased by Disney in 2006 for a cold hard $7 billion. And many of Pixar's top staff subsequently took on big responsibilities at the House of Mouse. This had a slow but noticeable impact on the output in both Pixar and Disney's feature animation divisions. But before the purchase, Disney opened up a new animation division purely out of spite for Pixar, Circle 7 Animation, that would pump out direct-to-video grade sequels of Pixar movies. Disney had the rights to the movies, but not the people who made them yet, and work had started on a Toy Story 3 that was pretty much just Toy Story 2 again with Woody and Buzz's roles reversed. Circle 7 was shut down by the time Disney bought Pixar, but they still wanted them to produce more sequels. Lo and behold, 4 years after the purchase, 4 years being the average time it takes to make a Pixar movie, Pixar's very own Toy Story 3 was set to release in theaters. Did I know about any of this? Not really. I was playing The Incredibles when Danger Calls one day in 2008 when my dad yelled my name from halfway across the house. I thought I was in trouble for playing The Incredibles when Danger Calls, but when I got to the living room, he pointed to his newspaper and shouted, "They're making a Toy Story 3! They're making a Toy Story 3!" That was the happiest day of my life. Until I actually read the article and they said it was 2 years away. 2 years. I was 6. I had to wait what felt like years. Already hyped to see WALL-E, I saw that and loved it. But I was not giving Pixar any more satisfaction until they released the movie I had been waiting my entire life to see in theaters. I didn't see Up in the cinema, waiting until it was on DVD to give it a chance, and you better believe I was there when the first 2 Toy Stories were re-released in 3D. I needed my fix. I didn't even care about the 3D gimmick, I just wanted to see Toy Story in a theater so badly. Watched the teaser trailers every day on YouTube, read everything I could about Toy Story Mania without going to or playing it, waiting impatiently for this decade to be over and for this beautiful, fresh decade to begin. Maybe Toy Story 3 would end the swine flu, a kid can dream. That was my experience as an 8-year-old in 2009 and early 2010. Everyone older than me was looking forward to it as well, especially the 90s kids who were Andy's age when the first 2 were brand new. The long wait for this movie was grueling on everyone, but that actually made it better.
Wait a minute, hold on. This is no time to be hysterical.
It's the perfect time to be hysterical.
Should we be hysterical? Now!
Yes!
Maybe, but not right now.
The story is all about what happens when Andy heads off to college, having long outgrown playing with Woody and Buzz and the gang. While he intended on taking Woody and putting the others in the attic, misunderstandings and shenanigans lead to the gang heading for Sunnyside Daycare. There, they're welcomed with open arms. Until they get played with by the toddlers, then it becomes a prison movie. Now that's a jump, right? Well, not really when you consider that all the Toy Story movies so far have involved escaping buildings and returning to Sanctuary. Dialing up the Great Escape influence is the logical extreme of this formula. It's more mature than the other movies and more willing to say things and go to places that are quite grim and geared to grown-up viewers. The Toy Story movies have never been kids' movies, they've always been made for all ages, but 3 is nearly a wolf in sheep's clothing. You've got oppression, class struggles, brainwashing, mass surveillance, and the looming threat that you're worth less if you're old and your child doesn't need you anymore. There's more brutal ideas posed than in any other Pixar movie up to this point, so it's a major miracle that they successfully earned this step up. We're still following children's toys, so it should be off-putting that they're figuratively locked up in jail and literally on the brink of destruction. But with new characters like these, yeah, I can see this being more mature was a good thing. Lotso Huggin' Bear is the kindly old gentleman in charge of Sunnyside Daycare. At least, that's how he appears. When his kingdom is threatened, he He reveals himself as a bitter tyrant. He's got the backstory to match, having his heart broken so badly that it completely disappeared. Ned Beatty truly gets to flex his legendary range with Lotso. The shortest lines from him are the ones that have stuck with me the most. Between him and Stinky Pete, I may prefer the Prospector for there being more layers and build-up to his motivation, but with Lotso, you get to see him be evil for longer, which is its own benefit. His assistant, Big Baby, is one of the most tragic characters in the franchise. Lotso is in full control of his destiny. They both have the same backstory, but Big Baby was designed to and will always have the mind of an infant. That's gotta hurt. He's not so threatening by the end. They make it clear he's not at fault for anything and still misses their owner. Ken, as in the Barbie character, also isn't that much of a villain despite his alignment. He's complicit in the system, but aren't we all? Ken cares way more about what he was made for, Barbie and accessories, than choosing sides, but it takes guts to stand up to your ruler in your boxes. Did you know that Stretch the Purple Octopus was played by Whoopi Goldberg? There was some missed opportunities with her. The design's great at being both welcoming and threatening, but she doesn't even get much to say really. Lotso's other cronies, the Bugman, Rock Guy, and Robo Randy, are in the same boat. They all provide visual variety, but are less than the sum of their parts, unlike Sid's group of toys who didn't even speak but leave more of an impression. There's also Bookworm, the grouchy librarian. Hopefully he serves as an obvious clue as to what my next series review will be. We're introduced to a new human kid in the form of Bonnie, a kindergartner with an imagination as big as Andy's. She's set up as the next best option, and has her own room full of toys, including Rassilon, a Shakespearean hedgehog who I assume was meant to come out German. I don't know what causes some toys to come out this way. Buttercup, a unicorn with the voice of Jeff Garlin. There's Trixie the Triceratops, finally another gamer. There's Dolly the doll, finally another Bonnie Hunt. 3 Peas in a Pod, who I guess would make for terrible stress relievers. And lastly, there's Chuckles the Clown. The cut to his face always makes me smile, even though I know it isn't meant to be hilarious. I find it nice that Bud Lucky, the original character designer for Woody, who decided he should be a cowboy rather than a ventriloquist doll, got to voice a very compelling character in Toy Story 3. They came full circle.
Me debo de haber estrellado y se me ha borrado la memoria. ¿Han visto mi nave espacial?
We gotta switch him back.
While John Lasseter was still involved in the story, he handed the directing duties over to Toy Story 2's co-director Lee Unkrich, who would later be in charge of Coco. From this, you might be able to infer he likes to make his movies with 2 things: Spanish cultures and really heavy stuff. There's no beating around the fact that Toy Story 3 lays it on thick, looking at what goes through toys when their owners no longer have any need for them. It's easy to imagine they'll find a community that cares for them, and new kids that'll love them all over again, but that's much easier to think than accomplish. Since this was released 10.5 years after the last installment, it was inevitable that this one would tackle the concept of growing up and moving on with your life. We get a massive time skip of 10 years, not really seeing Andy gradually lose interest in the toys, but jumping straight to his last summer before college. The passage of time is thrust upon you. Now the toys have to really worry about getting thrown away, class struggles at Sunnyside, and if they even want to be played with by the new generation, if that new generation is going to be rough on them. With any trilogy, you can take the Christmas Carol approach to story structure analysis, with each installment being a past, present, and future. And this is the future, where most of Andy's toys think they've been forgotten and unloved. They're never in danger of adopting Lotso's cynical worldview of the kid-toy relationship, but the instinct most of them share is to move on. Jessie's role in this is immaculate. If you know one thing about her, it's that she's been through all of this before. She's the one most visibly struck by their supposed abandonment. She's the one who gets the idea to go to daycare. Her yee-haw over the revolving door of kids at Sunnyside is the loudest sigh of relief you'll ever hear. The class divide narrative between the Caterpillar Room and Butterfly Room is as deep as you want it to be. Is it about how unjust society forcing a lower class so the higher classes can stay high? Or are the Butterfly Room toys the high school kids who sit at the popular table? You don't have to think of it as this super mature metaphor if you don't want to. The shift to a Prison Break plot seems to benefit the more mature tone, but look at where they're breaking out of. Sure, the world is big and dangerous to a toy, even a place like this, but the helper is a colourful phone, the security camera operator is a monkey. I always found the monkey funny, I have to get it out there. We were made of sterner stuff back then. It's also miraculous that Andy's toys still fit into these more serious concepts. Toy Story 2 did some grunt work in positing questions about morality to Woody, but with the passage of time, it seems their level of expertise has matured somewhat. Not all of them are still around, they had to strike a mix of toys that Andy would have kept, so nothing too childish like Lenny or the blue robot dude, but ones that can add to the story, like the potato heads and aliens, those are keepers. Most have been hardened, but ironically, they don't look visibly aged. If anything, they look a little glossier than before. Mrs. Potato Head's eye going missing is the biggest visual indicator that a decade has passed, and they managed to make it a plot point. Their main ally, however, has taken a hit. Look at poor old Buster. Father Time has an awful sense of humour. Woody faces some trouble, a big conflict of interest with the others in Act 1, but it's not Black Friday, he's completely in line with what we know of him. Jessie's given a bit more vinegar, there's more of her sassing back, but I find this understandable. We know she can get mean if her goals are threatened, but it's nearly all directed at bad guys now. It's great that they can still be challenged, and in new ways instead of merely repeating their past conflicts. They save that for Buzz. He takes a proverbial beating in Toy Story 3. For the first half, it's more of the same from 2, him being the leader of the toys in action. Nothing wrong with that. Him sticking to his guns and not following Woody out of Sunnyside has set up that they might be growing apart. But this isn't followed up on, because then Lotso reverts Buzz to his factory setting, wiping his memory and turning him into a deluded soldier who thinks the rest of Andy's toys are minions of Zurg. I've grown more conflicted on this plot swerve with time. Some of the Pixar staff must have really wanted to bring back Astronaut Buzz any chance they could. Toy Story 2 had a whole location where that personality could be revisited, but now they have to effectively reset the Buzz we know just to have it back again. I'm keen on the spin they put on it, that he's now a more active threat and being used by the wrong paws. However, it seems they aren't secure with the Buzz we know. At least it leads to yet another reset, which somehow makes him Spanish. It makes sense, some toys with voice boxes have multiple languages to choose from, but that's not the reason I find this so entertaining. If they're going to have to make Buzz harder to work with, a language barrier was a novel mechanic. Plus, Buzz is a lot of fun in Spanish mode, his more extravagant body language, him getting overly romantic with Jessie, and he taught me that enemy in Spanish is enemigo. This is a great language. But when he gets crushed by a TV and reset to his original mode, it reminds me that, oh yeah, Buzz wasn't all there for nearly half the movie. He had a lot of functional uses to the story, but I vastly prefer the approach they took with him last time. The character I was most excited to see again when revisiting this movie was Andy, because he had to have been challenging to work with. He was such a blank slate in the first two, and there's nothing wrong with that. But now he's 17, he's got a lot more to deal with, a more fleshed out rapport with Molly, who's also got to be more interesting. Yet still, they keep his character fairly basic until the very end, which is a good call. The most you feel for him is when we get a vision of him asking his mother where his bag with the toys is, and them both being distraught when they figure out what happened. That's emotional enough for now. Then there's the scene where he's giving his toys to Bonnie, where he goes down to her level and treats them as if he were a little kid again. This, I can get behind. I know why others find it kinda silly or dorky or what have you, but if this is the last time he's ever gonna see his toys, including Woody, who he considered taking to college, it was his best option to go out with a bang. They did just enough with Andy to make him more dimensional here, while still keeping him relatable for any viewer going through this, and still not telling us what kind of college he's going to. My film theory is that he's looking at a career in toy design. That's why he was planning on taking Woody and still values what little time he can have playing with them. If there's anything you can say this is odd about, it's the score. A lot of the music is melodies repurposed from the first two movies, and while this one does have a few of its own tracks and its own more somber identity, The reused tracks are still associated with the original scenes in my head. I bet you they were placeholders and kept in to make the movie that extra bit more nostalgic. The biggest difference is the implementation of licensed music. The only comparable thing is the first movie having a snippet of Hakuna Matata, but now you've got a few pop music tracks, the kind you'd hear in other animated movies. Seems commercial, but to be fair, they're played for Ken, the most materialistic character. It wouldn't have been as funny if they made their own 70s sounding songs for these moments. You want to talk about oddities? Here's one. Why get a pigeon to attack Mr. Tortilla Head? Pigeons aren't nocturnal. I know a lot of random things about pigeons, so I have to say them somewhere. Another oddity that I find way funnier is how they reuse voice clips. You know that scream Woody makes in the first movie when he meets Buzz? They reuse that in 3 completely different scenes here. I guess to celebrate this being the 3rd movie? I don't know Lee's divine plan. The presentation is great overall though, and the animation is still spectacular. I'd go as far as to say this is still the best looking movie in the series. There's still a bit of cartooniness to the designs, but the detail is way more plentiful. It seems they've mastered every fabric and surface they need to for the Toy Story universe now. In fact, they found reasons to include every major milestone in their technology they'd made over the past decade. They're better with fur, liquids, fire, terrain, food, and most of all, trash. Since there's more rubbish in this movie, and it's a key component of the story, the toys fearing they'll become it, it's good that it looks authentic, but not disgusting. Attention to detail is also way up. Pixar's Easter egg A-game extends to how they integrate subtle references to the earlier Toy Story movies. I like how the Buzz Lightyear manual makes it very clear that it's not a flying toy. I believe the theory that the first Garbage Man is a grown-up Sid, and it's good that they remembered that Andy's family lives in a tri-county area. Both the previous movies alluded to that. You think they live in Danville? There's also this moment of a bunch of primary-colored baby toys hiding in fear underneath some furniture. Where have I seen that before? Just like Toy Story 2, the Lighters got to be very expressive and creative with their part in telling the story. Much more so with how many different moods are crammed into this adventure. I hope whoever was in charge of the color script was given a raise because they used the whole rainbow and it always works. 3rd time in a row where it's very hard to choose favorite scenes, but I'll try. It peaks early on with the opening play session, which is great from start to finish. It's cool to finally see what goes through Andy's head when he's playing with the toys, and they waited for the right time for the CGI to pull off the scope. I find it really endearing too that Woody, Buzz, Jessie, and Bullseye are all completely in character as themselves. Like Andy somehow knows exactly how they act in real life. Woody's easy breakout from Sunnyside, compared to the rest of the movie, fills out the traditional Toy Story adventure vibe, before the movie takes on a darker tone, but after you're ready to see this kind of action again. Lotso's backstory is something you haven't gotten in any of the movies up to now, but a villain's backstory was finally warranted. Sid and Al didn't need them, Stinky Pete explains it all in one sentence, but for Lotso, we need to feel that tragedy to understand why he grew so hostile towards his lot in life as a toy. It works that he had a crew with him, Big Baby, who he could easily control, and Chuckles, who has to bear just as much of an emotional burden watching Lotso change. All the prison break stuff is fun too. It takes up a lot of time, so that's a very good thing. Everyone gets a chance to do something, with Barbie proving herself to be a notably valuable asset to the team. There's so much happening and it's all so funny and character driven that you can look over the failed spot checks. I guess I can live with the pigeon being nocturnal. Woody confronting Lotso about Daisy and his ensuing loss of control is really good, mostly for Big Baby. He'd just gotten a moment that shows he still misses Daisy, so him finding out there's something wrong with Lotso's account of events and turning on him, throwing him in the dumpster, that is awesome. Ken might have taken charge, but it was Big Baby who really saved Sunnyside. The goodbyes hit you right in the feels in the right way. At first, all the toys wishing Woody luck at college, at least before he joins them with a new plan. Then Andy's mum coming into his room and getting sad. This is one for the parents, but It gets me too because it's saying it's finally happened, and he's already left the room we've known since that first Christmas with Buzz. Then Andy waving goodbye to his toys. The little reaction and "thanks guys" makes me think that Woody and Buzz moved off screen. That's my unprovable theory and I'm sticking to it. And finally, the credits montage is a pleasant closer. Pixar had long since abandoned the blooper reel, but kept finding ways to make their credits interesting, and giving us a few more scenes with these characters to show that things have changed for the best. So Long Partner is still the end of the story, but here's a couple where are they now scenes. Ken and Barbie have made Sunnyside cool and groovy, the army men apparently spent more than 3 days traveling by air. Hey, they're light. And Andy's old toys are initiated into Bonnie's room, going from point A to point B. We Belong Together is a wonderfully uplifting song, but then it gives way for our traditional rearrangement of You've Got a Friend in Me. What are we up to now, 5? It's a Spanish version now, demonstrating that even though Buzz doesn't remember most of this adventure, it's gonna stick with him. But some scenes I have trouble with intentionally and logistically are as follows. Intentionally, the toddler's playing with the toys. It's supposed to be overwhelming and disgusting, but comes off as annoying. Plus, the toys have to know what really little kids are like, since many of them are older than Molly. Time for me to be a heartbreaker, but looking back, there's big flaws with the incinerator scene. But the reason I have trouble with it logistically is that I believe the aliens using the claw to save them is a bit too easy. Sure, they like claws, but how did they even get into this room, and how could they see the toys in this sinkhole? Sour grapes, this is still an amazing movie, and not far from 2 in my opinion. For me, this movie is so impactful and complete that it feels like the finale of Golden Age Pixar. I've seen a couple people label it as part of the decline era though, and while I disagree, I can see where they're coming from. It's a sequel from the 2010s, it already hits most of the criteria. But what separates this from the other Pixar sequels from this decade is that I think it earns its right to continue the story. It answers questions the last century posited, continues to expand on the world in interesting ways, adds enough new ideas to stand on its own, and makes the Toy Story film series all still feel like one satisfying story. It might have been too beloved for its own good, however. Back in 2010, Toy Story 3 was a critical darling and an enormous commercial success, setting the precedent pretty high. If you didn't like the movie, you had to be a contrarian. But there's a growing consensus that it was overall solid but unhealthy for Pixar in hindsight. You have to blame Toy Story 3 for the latest sequels and prequels that got very divisive reactions from Pixar fans. There's no denying they mainly got made because Toy Story 3 did so well at the box office. But whatever era you ascribe it to, golden, decline, or neither as its own transitional state, there's still evidence that all the Toy Story movies serve as markers for Pixar's changing identity over time. But what a way to round out one of the greatest film trilogies of all time, is what we all thought before November 6th, 2014.
And those guys from the Christmas decorations box, they're fun, right?
Yeah.